Mr. Cassidy, Mr. Podak, and myself are all present, so all members are present this evening. We're going to bypass the approval of minutes. We just got those and we need some revisions to those, so we're going to pause on that and pick those up the next meeting. Open issues, Finance Director? Nothing open?
Nothing open.
Mr. Mayor?
I have no issues.
And Mr. Keckler, any open issues? Okay. We'll move on to new business. Mr. Danduran, would you like to do?
Yeah, a couple things. First, just an update of where we're at in the department itself. We have provided the independent auditing firm, let me rephrase that, independent accounting firm, all of our cash basis financial statements. They're in the process of converting those to GAAP. We are also in the process of getting prepared for our financial statement audit, which begins next week with another independent auditing firm. So those two things are going on. We have second interviews for the position that will be opening June 1st. Those take place tomorrow and Thursday. So hopefully we will have a new candidate that we can bring on board here within the next couple weeks. I provided each member with a summary of where we are through the first quarter in terms of revenue and expenses. I tried to use our new, we call it a BIS module, business information software that is supposed to help us with report writing and make it a little bit easier. This is my first attempt, so I'm open to feedback. I will say the expense report that shows you the 4 years of expenses, that is about as consolidated of a report as I can find. Most of what comes off the authority software is about 45 to 60 pages. And it just isn't, it's not conducive for what you guys are looking for. So hopefully this meets your needs. And we'll start with the expenses. The difference between what I sent you last week and what you have in front of you today is just the footnotes. There are no changes in the numbers. These numbers could change for analytical purposes. They're correct. We're still working on March closing. Our revenues are reconciled, but we're still off a little bit on our expenses. But for analytical purposes and for your guys' purposes, this gives you a pretty good idea of where we're at through the first quarter. And in the general fund and looking at the expenses, you see our budget of almost $12 million in expenditures, and we spent $2.4 million in the first quarter. A couple of items of note, the utility bill, our electric utility bill has gone up significantly here in the first part of the year. The mayor and I do have a meeting next week with a supplier to see about what we can do on that side of things. Interestingly enough, they've shared with us our savings are on the gas side, not the electric. So go figure. On the fringe benefits, you're going to see that we are running significantly higher than last year, and that is again a result of our 25% increase in the health insurance. Working our way down on that expense summary, the $79,600 at the airport, that should look familiar to you. We passed a then and now purchase order for $79,600 for striping that was done in a previous year that we finally got paid this year. The 227, Fund 227, Grants Brownfield, that is the Clark Station. So those expenditures don't match up currently dollar for dollar due to timing differences, but you'll see on the revenue side, revenues that are about $146,000. So that's a grant that we spend the money. We don't actually pay the invoices, but we submit the invoices to the grant agency. They review it, fund us the money, then we write the checks back out. So we don't have to come out of pocket necessarily on that particular grant. Turning to page 3, or the third page, I should say, you see again the fringe benefits are up due to our health insurance. The capital outlays in the water department, we did purchase a pack feed, had pack feed construction along with some ground maintenance. I think we bought a mower and then a water meter truck, an F-250. So our capital expenditures are somewhat front-end loaded in this year's budget. It does not concern me. We're staying within budget. But if you were to look at our capital account, the general capital, we allocate $200,000 every year in that account. We've spent more than we've actually transferred in at this point. So that's something we need to consider and maybe do a advance accrual per se to get that to zero. But everything we've purchased is on our capital outlay. I'm not concerned that we have front-end loaded those items. On the sewer, that supplies, materials, repairs and maintenance. I need to consider, I don't know if it was budgeted in that line item. It must have been, but I don't understand quite sure why. But we put $50,000 of fencing out at the sewer plant and also purchased a truck. And it, for some reason, it's been recorded in that line item. So I'm not sure how or why, but I'll work with Cindy, our state auditor, to see if that's where it was budgeted, and possibly we might do a reclass into the right line item. Overall, I would say our expenses are running below budget. Areas of concern where you're going to hear back from me to ask for additional money will be in the fringe benefit area and potentially now in the utility area, depending on, so utilities is broad. It's electric, it's gas, it's phones. So while we're running over on the electric, we may be running under on some of those other utilities, but don't be surprised if in the fourth quarter I'm back saying, hey, we need to appropriate some additional dollars for utilities. On the revenue side, we did get our first half real estate settlement in February or in March from Hancock and Seneca County. Wood counties did not come through until April. So when you include Wood County settlement in, our real estate tax revenue for the first half is actually up 8% from the prior year. And we would have anticipated that considering there was a revaluation done and all of that inside millage sees the effect of that increased appraised values. So our income tax is steady with last year. It's 1% up. I think I talked to you guys last month and said it was up 10, but don't get excited. What I am excited though about is last year income tax revenue went up 5% in the first quarter, and we've been able to maintain that 5% increase plus come up another 1%. So it was, you wonder when you get income tax revenues because they fluctuate, you wonder, is that going to be continual or is that a blip and we're going to go back down? I'm happy to report that at least in the first quarter, it maintained itself. The investment earnings and donations, that's a pretty broad line item, depending on what fund you're in. That line item could be advances, it could be transfers. In the general fund, though, it is primarily investment earnings, and that is a reflection of a $50,000 increase in our investment earnings in the first quarter due to higher rates and due to a larger investment portfolio. Charges for services are down. We have a Verizon rental agreement for a tower, which is $20,000, not quite $20,000 a year. That has not been received yet. In following up with them today, for some reason our account was on hold, and they will generate the check. So all you got to do is call and ask. It's surprising what happens. Continuing through, on the second page, you'll see our Fund 227, the Brownfield grant. That's the Clark Station, so that's the revenue that goes matches up with the expense that we talked about previously. In the city cleanup, the investment earnings and donations, what that is we've had 5 homes go into foreclosure. When it goes into foreclosure, a bond has to be posted for $10,000 to make sure that they go through with it and maintain the property and move it on. Once that property is completely taken care of, we in essence write them a check back for $9,750. So we just had a number of foreclosures go through in the first quarter, and that's what drove that number.
So that was a wash, except for $50 for each 10,000.
$250, yeah. Yeah, you got it. In governmental accounting, you show it broad. You show the revenue, and then you got to show the expenditure. And going to the water fund, Fund 501, our charges for the water bill is consistent with what the increase was that went through at the first of the year. So that is trending in the direction that we thought it would. And then in stormwater management, I think if you remember, it might have been last month, we had some income pass through that account, and what it was, we had a duplicate payment on the North Main Street project. When that check came back to us, we had to record it as revenue because the project was closed and it was in a prior year. So it's really a misnomer, that $57,000. And the $12,000 you see in grants is the beginning of us starting to draw on the Reservoir 4 project. Again, that project's supported by a grant. You'll see that activity running through that fund throughout this year. Any questions or concerns after the first quarter? My assessment is we are trending well with our revenues. And I think based off of the first quarter, our pace of revenue is consistent with what we budgeted, and our expenses are actually trending a little less than budget.
Two things. I would be interested to know who the independent accounting firms are we're working with.
Never heard of them. BHM is the one that does our financial audit, and I want to say Julian Grube is the cash to gap conversion.
They do a lot of that.
Both of those were appointed by the auditor of state since we're in fiscal emergency.
And then in regard to the reports, I like the 3 years of history. I like to be able to compare and see what we did and see if there's any anomalies standing out there. You mean, you do a great job of pointing those out, but I like to look down through them and see if anything stands out to me. Is it possible, and I know it may not be with your new software, but I'm wondering, is it possible to either show us appropriations to date by a percentage basis or a remaining unencumbered balance?
Oh, okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The numbers that
Yep.
were through the first quarter would
Yep.
be 25%, which
Yep.
is what we're looking at.
Yeah, but that's what we're hoping
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
But if you go down through here,
Right.
I should see that the benefits, for example, are trending at 35 or 40%, or
Okay.
it's
Yeah.
it's nice to be able to just look down through there, and I know quarter two I should be seeing 25%.
Yep. And if I can't figure out how to do it with the report writing software, all of it does export into Excel, and I can add the columns, so it's not a big
Yeah,
deal.
it's just a formula.
So, yep.
So thank you. Anything else you wanted to share? Okay.
None at this
Mr.
time.
Mayor, new business?
None.
Mr. Keckler? Okay. At this time, we'll ask if there's anyone from the public that would like to make comments related to Finance Committee issues.
It's over here.
State your name.
He's getting trained.
I'm Paul Allison, 118.5 West Center Street. I got here a little late. I can't walk as fast as I used to. Sorry. Did I understand, Steve, you to say that income tax was up 1% and real estate collections were up 3%?
8%.
8%?
8%.
I'm glad I asked because I wrote it down as 3. I guess my hearing isn't as good either. That's basically my question. I wanted to make sure I heard that correctly, and obviously I didn't hear it correctly. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Deb Tyson, 800 Woodward Avenue, Lot 9. I don't know, but I think it's finance it needs to go to. I was at that workshop, and my concern is that land bank's money is going into this landlord tenants. Somehow they're being mixed, and I wanted to know if that's,
Things, one has nothing to do with.
but no monies are being shared.
Nothing has, they don't have. I think the president was trying very hard last week to make sure that those two conversations didn't meld into one, so they're two different conversations, so one does not have.
I just wondered about the monies. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else with comments for the Finance Committee? Okay, with that, I will say that our next meeting would be, I believe it's May 20th at 5:30 in council chambers. And if I could have a motion to adjourn,
Second.
we are adjourned at 5:46.